Hey everyone, and welcome back to Today here on News and Views. Samantha, it's been it's been a wild ride following the news lately,
It certainly has.
especially with President-elect Trump's ideas
Oh, yeah.
about, redrawing the world map.
It's like he's going back to history class saying, hey, remember those colonial times? Let's try that again.
Right.
It's definitely raising some eyebrows.
For sure. And what's really got people talking is how he's not just suggesting like small policy changes or diplomatic, nudges.
Right.
He's straight up saying the U.S. should just take new territories.
Yeah, like actually acquire them.
Yeah, specifically Greenland and the Panama Canal.
Bold move, to say the least.
Bold is one word for it, Samantha. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
We've got a ton of news articles reacting to this, all sorts of analysis on Trump's motivations, and even some historical stuff suggesting that this isn't,
Yeah.
a totally new idea.
Not at all.
Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with what Trump himself has actually said. He went on Truth Social, his social media platform, and said, and I quote, "For purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels that the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity."
Absolute necessity.
Yeah.
Those are some serious words, Samantha. He's making this sound like it's, life or death.
Right, and not just for the U.S., but for the whole world.
Yeah, for the entire world.
It's really interesting how he's using language.
It is.
He's trying to make it seem like the U.S. is like a protector.
Right.
And taking over Greenland would be good for everyone.
Like we're doing them a favor almost.
Exactly.
But then there's the Panama Canal,
Oh, yeah.
which is, well, a lot less
That is.
diplomatic. Yeah.
Yeah.
He basically accused Panama of ripping off the U.S. with all the fees they charge,
Right.
and even threatened to take it back.
It's giving very much like old school gunboat diplomacy vibes.
Seriously, though, Samantha, does any of this, legally hold up?
Hmm.
Can he just say he wants something and just take it?
Well, legally speaking, no. Those statements don't override international law or treaties or, the fact that other countries are like their own countries.
So basically just empty threats then?
Maybe a way to get attention and stir up some trouble.
I mean, it definitely got our attention.
True, but even if they don't directly break any laws, they're still important.
Okay, how so?
Well, they give us a peek into how Trump sees the world, his approach to foreign policy, and how he understands or maybe doesn't understand how complicated international relations are.
So what have the leaders of Greenland, Denmark, and Panama said about all this?
Oh, they are not happy.
I can imagine.
They've all come out strongly against Trump's ideas. Greenland's Prime Minister, Mute Ajade, flat out said, "Greenland is ours. We are not for sale and will never be for sale."
Wow.
And Panama's president, Jose Raul Mulino, was just as firm.
What did he say?
He emphasized that every square meter of the Panama Canal and its adjacent zones is part of Panama.
So they're making it very clear this isn't just about land or money, Samantha. This is about their independence, their right to decide their own future.
You got it, Derek.
It's about respect, dignity, a country's right to choose its own destiny. To even suggest that these places are up for grabs is just so disrespectful.
It's like he's not even seeing the people who live there, their history, their culture.
It's like he's looking at a map and just seeing blank spaces to fill in.
Exactly. But here's where things get a little tricky, Samantha. I was doing some reading, and
Yeah,
well, it turns out the U.S. has thought about taking these places before.
that's right. What's interesting is there actually is some historical precedent for these ideas,
Yeah.
crazy as they sound.
So,
Well, after World War II, President Truman tried to buy Greenland from Denmark.
really?
Yeah, and of course there's a whole history of the Panama Canal.
Right. The U.S. built it and controlled it for decades.
Exactly, until the 1977 treaty gave it back to Panama.
So it's not like this is completely out of the blue then. There's a history there, even if it's, not exactly something to be proud of these days. Right. These examples show how the U.S. has often looked at certain places just for their strategic importance or potential benefits.
And not really caring about the people who live there.
Exactly. It's all about power and control and not so much about respecting other countries' right to exist on their own terms.
It's like looking at history with blinders on only seeing what the U.S. wanted.
Yeah, and forgetting about the impact on everyone else.
But Samantha, the world's a different place now.
Absolutely.
It's not the age of empires anymore. International law has changed, the balance of power has shifted, and everyone's supposed to respect each other's sovereignty.
Right.
So why is this kind of thinking coming back now?
That, Derek, is the million-dollar question. And to answer it, we have to dig into what's motivating Trump.
Okay, so is he really trying to take over these places? Is this some kind of power play?
Possibly.
Is he just trying to distract everyone?
Maybe.
Or is it something else entirely?
Could be a bit of everything.
Okay, Samantha, I'm ready to lay it on me.
All right, let's untangle this web and see what we find. Well, let's start with his America First thing.
Okay.
You know, Trump has always been about putting America's interests above everything else, sometimes even over our allies or, what's considered acceptable internationally.
So he sees Greenland and the Panama Canal as like prizes that would make America stronger on the world stage.
Exactly. Greenland has all those untapped resources, and it's right there in the Arctic, which is becoming more and more important.
Strategically.
Yeah, exactly. It fits right into that idea of making sure America stays on top. And taking back the Panama Canal, well, that would be a huge symbolic win.
Showing everyone who's boss.
Right. Reaffirming America's control over one of the most important waterways in the world.
But Samantha, this kind of clashes with his whole thing about, pulling back from the world stage and bringing troops home.
It does seem a little contradictory.
On one hand, he's saying America first, and we're not getting involved in other countries' business. And on the other hand, he's talking about taking new territories and potentially starting new conflicts.
It's a bit of a puzzle.
Maybe it's not about being consistent. Maybe it's more about looking tough, showing that he's not afraid to make big moves, even if they seem to contradict each other.
It could be. He is good at creating a spectacle, that's for sure.
And this is definitely getting people talking.
For sure. It's all over the headlines. Everyone's debating it, and he's right in the center of it all.
Okay, but Samantha, we can't just write this off as him playing to the cameras.
Oh, right.
There are real consequences to think about.
Absolutely.
If he really believes the U.S. should take these places, how does he think that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Would he try to buy them? Or would he use force?
It's hard to say what he's really thinking, but if we look at how he's acted in the past and what he's said, it wouldn't be surprising if he used pressure tactics, economic leverage, even military threats to get what he wants.
That's kind of scary, Samantha.
It is.
We've already seen how just talking about this has strained relationships with our allies.
For sure.
Imagine the backlash if he actually tried to do it.
It would be a disaster. It would damage America's reputation and standing in the world, alienate our friends, embolden our enemies, and could even destabilize entire regions.
So, Samantha, what's the bottom line here? Does he have a real plan? Or is this just about ego impulsiveness and showing off his power no matter the cost?
I think it's probably a mix of all those things.
Like what?
There's the whole America First ideology for sure.
Right.
There's the calculated use of provocative language.
To get a reaction.
Then maybe even a genuine belief that he can reshape the world the way he wants it.
And Samantha, we can't forget that this isn't just about grabbing land.
No.
It's about completely disregarding the right of other countries to exist and make their own decision.
Exactly. It's a really dangerous precedent to set.
And Samantha, this whole pattern isn't limited to Greenland and the Panama Canal.
You're right.
We need to talk about what Trump has been saying about Mexico.
Yes, definitely. This is where things get even more worrying.
Okay, so fill me in. What has he been saying?
Well, he's talked about labeling Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
Okay, what would that mean?
On the surface, it might seem like just a symbolic gesture,
Right.
like a way to talk tough about these criminal groups.
Right.
But it could have huge consequences legally and militarily.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow. Explain the implications, Samantha. What could actually happen?
Well, when you label a group as a terrorist organization, it opens up a whole range of options, like
Right.
things like targeted sanctions, freezing their assets, and even military intervention.
Wait, are you saying that Trump might actually be considering using the military in Mexico?
He hasn't specifically said he'd invade, but what he's been saying is definitely alarming.
I mean,
He's talked about bombing fentanyl labs and sending in special forces to take out cartel leaders.
Samantha, that's terrifying.
It is.
Mexico's a sovereign nation, their key ally, and our biggest trading partner.
I know.
Using the military there would be incredibly reckless and could be disastrous.
It absolutely would. It could throw the whole region into chaos, further destabilize Mexico, and cause immense suffering on both sides of the border. It's a completely irresponsible idea.
This feels like a dangerous game he's playing. Samantha throwing around inflammatory language and threats of force just to show everyone he's in charge.
It's a pattern we've seen before.
Like how?
He often takes extreme positions, creates a sense of crisis, and then makes it seem like he's the only one who can fix it.
Right, like he's the hero.
Exactly. It's a risky tactic that could have terrible consequences.
So what's the big picture here, Samantha? Is this part of some grand strategy? Or is it more about ego impulsiveness and just wanting to get his way no matter what?
It's probably a combination of things.
Yeah.
You've got his ideology, his personal ambitions, and this deep-seated belief that whoever has the most power wins.
And Samantha, it's this total disregard for the rights of other countries that's really scary.
Absolutely.
Whether it's about Greenland, the Panama Canal, or Mexico, these statements paint a really disturbing picture of how he sees the world and America's place in it.
You're absolutely right. It's this worldview where everything is a zero-sum game. One country wins and the other one loses. Power always trumps diplomacy, and force always trumps cooperation.
Samantha, we've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
and it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
What stands out to you most about this whole situation?
What really strikes me is how much disrespect these pronouncements show.
In what way?
It's not just about the land or resources. It's about dismissing the agency and dignity of entire nations. It's like he's treating sovereign countries like pieces on a chessboard.
That's a good point, Samantha. These pronouncements reveal a real lack of respect for the idea that countries have the right to govern themselves and work together.
Exactly. These are principles that people have worked so hard to establish over decades, and he's just tossing them aside.
It's like taking a giant step backwards.
It is. It's a regression to a world that's more volatile, less predictable, and where power often dictates everything.
And that's a pretty sobering thought to end on, Samantha. But I think it's really important for our listeners to grasp how serious this situation is and what could happen if these ideas actually take hold.
It is sobering, Derek, and it makes you wonder, about the future.
Yeah.
How are other countries going to react to this kind of, in-your-face, aggressive approach from the U.S.?
Right.
Will they stand up for themselves and defend, international rules, or will they be pressured into giving in dress?
And Samantha, what about countries like China and Russia? Won't they see this as a chance to, push their own agendas, knowing that the U.S. is willing to break the rules whenever it's convenient?
That's a good point. Derek Trump's pronouncements could actually embolden them, make them feel like it's okay to go after their own territorial goals or, exert more influence in areas they consider strategically important.
Like he's accidentally giving them a guidebook
Right.
for how to act.
Exactly. Making it
Yeah.
seem like it's okay to just disregard international law and sovereignty to get what you
And
want.
Samantha, I keep going back to this.
Yeah.
Is this really about taking over these places? Or is there something else going on? Was it a distraction, a negotiating tactic, or just a way to appeal to his base?
I think it's probably a multi-pronged strategy, Derek.
Okay, how so?
These pronouncements create this sense of crisis, a threat to America that only he can solve.
So it's about holding on to power, looking strong, and controlling the narrative.
Yeah. Even if it means, shaking the foundations of global order and stability.
Exactly. And Samantha, that's what makes this whole thing so dangerous.
It is.
It's not just about these specific territories.
Right.
It's about the erosion of trust, the disregard for the rules, and the potential for things to escalate into conflict.
Absolutely, Derek. And that's why this is so important.
Yeah.
Words have power. Even if he never actually tries to take these places, the damage to America's reputation and credibility in the world could be lasting.
It's like a reminder, Samantha, that we can't just ignore these kinds of statements. They challenge the very idea of countries working together and respecting each other's sovereignty ideas that have taken so long to build.
Exactly, Derek. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that the world order that we take for granted is actually quite fragile.
And that we have to work to protect it.
We do.
Well, Samantha, this has been a fascinating, if a bit unsettling look at what President-elect Trump's pronouncements could mean for the world.
It has.
It's a lot to process, but I think it's so important for our listeners to understand the history, the motivations, and the potential consequences of this kind of thinking.
I agree, Derek. It's complex and nuanced, but it's a conversation we need to have. And I really encourage everyone listening to keep digging into these issues, ask questions, and talk about it with their friends, family, and communities.
Great advice, Samantha. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of the most important stories of our time.
It's been a pleasure, Derek. And to everyone listening, stay curious, stay engaged, and remember that the future of global relations is something that affects us all.
Well said, Samantha. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you back here on Today, News and Views for another deep dive into the news that matters.